I'd particularly like to welcome our old friend Joni back, who's going to play a major role this week in terms of taking us through Brigit. And there's going to be two parts to her input. She's going to tell the story of Brigit and then share some of the work she's been doing on some latest research on Brigit. And then in between, we have Karina and her story on Brigit from her book, She. So that's the plan for tonight. Just a quick recap. If you recall last week, we went right back to the Irish Foundation myth, and we did a brief overview of the journey that Cessa was on, and that extraordinarily significant mythic moment in the history, certainly of Ireland and arguably the Western world, where the First Lady to arrive in Ireland did not get on Noah's Ark because he wouldn't let her on the Ark. And rather than feel sorry for herself, she took matters into her own hand and decided she would start again. So I will take you through a similar comparison, which was brilliantly laid out by the scholar Mary Condren, who we had on A Mythic Minds. And she talked about a very important distinction between sacrifice and mercy. And I'll take you briefly through that, but I'll also load up the Mythic Minds, which is Mary Condren, a prominent theologian who's one of the top people in the world on Brigit scholarship, in the recordings. So we've got quite a rich amount on Brigit. And of course, the fact that we have Brigit's Day in the 1st of February is also significant and a major moment that this goddess was acknowledged by the Irish state for the festival of Imbolc. But for now, let us kick off with Joni, who's going to tell us the story of Brigit. So, Joni, you're very welcome. Lovely to have you back with us. And over to you for Brigit.
I'm just going to give a brief outline first of all, and we'll go into more detail later on. Now, Brigit comes in two parts. She's a goddess and she's a saint, and she's called, because of her strength in belief structure, she was called Mura na Vale, or Mary of the Irish. And Mura itself, as a form of Mary, is reserved only for Jesus's mother. So that's how important Brigit was. The goddess, as we understand from a few different texts, was born of two very, very prominent members of the Tuatha De Danann tribe, and that would be namely her mother, the Morrigan, the Morrigan, the great queen, with her raven sisters, Mauve and Bov, the battle goddess, or Scald a Raven, as she was also known, and Dog, the god of generosity, and the oak and the cauldron of plenty. She was kind of abandoned after birth, as the Morrigan was not the best of mothers, and she was suckled by a cow from the other world who, being white with red ears, marked them out as being a fairy cow or not fully of this earth. Her name Brigit means bright shining one, which could be more titular than her actual name, but that's what she's known as, from the Hebrides in Scotland all the way down to France and Spain and across the Celtic parts of Germany. So the belief in her wandered all through the Celtic lands of Europe. Brigit is known as a triple goddess, like her mother. She is in three forms, as in she's the goddess of poetry, song. She's the goddess of animal husbandry. Most notably, she's associated with bees, beekeeping, and honey making, and she is often known as Honey Mouth or the sweet talking one. And she is also known as the goddess of smithing. Um, Obviously, if you want to do farming, you also have to have a harrow and a plough. Um, what we do know about the pagan goddess or the pre-Christian deity is that she took she took form, a human form, and then made it her life's mission in order to teach people. So she became the god, the head of a monastic settlement, teaching men and women, and she in that had a 30-year cycle of uh, how she taught her initiates, and her initiates had 10 years of learning in the settlement, 10 years of 10 years of administering to the public, and 10 years of teaching once they had finished their ministry and coming back to the convent or monastic settlement with all their knowledge and teaching it to the next generation. There were 19 of them, and she being the 20th. And so, like the Vestal Virgins or the sacred women of Rome and of Greece, there was an eternal flame that lit all the way through day and night, and was tended each of the 20 days by each of the 19 initiates, and on the 20th day by Brigit herself. And from a couple of different sources, we know that this flame was going all the way through to the early 18th century and was quenched by the penal laws and was reignited by the current stream of Brigidine sisters in 93 or 94. And the Brigidine sisters, as they are known today, were actually begun in the early, in 1801 was when the order uh, first came together by the Bishop of Leighlin at the time, but it was actually towards the tail end of the penal laws in the 1780s that the order came together again. Now, Brigit, because she's the patron of animal husbandry, there are lots of people bring things of hers in to make their animals be fruitful and to multiply. And as she became more Christianized, that took the form of creating a St. Bridget's cross, around which there are legends about how that came to be, namely that she was converting people at their deathbed. But this cross was made of reeds. It's made of reeds, usually found at Imbolc, which is the first of the fire festivals of the year. There's four of them. There's Imbolc, Bealtaine, Lunasa, and of course Samhain, which we've just had, or Halloween. But she's supposed to be born at this time of the year, which is why the festival is dedicated to her. And of course, it's early spring by concept of most of the rest of the world, but it's agricultural spring in Ireland because we have such mild winters in comparison to everybody else in our latitude. And she then protects through amassing holy water or amassing water dedicated to her from her many sacred wells around the country, or putting out pieces of fabric which become her cloak, which soak up the morning dew over the 3 days surrounding the festival. And this water is put upon the cattle, the sheep, and whatever animals you have. Some people tend to keep llamas and ostriches these days, and they all benefit from being blessed by Brigit. Now, as um, as Ireland turned to Christianity, what we have is this kind of 300 or 400 year period where we see lots of prayers and hymns to Brigit, which acknowledge her pre-Christian background and put Christian values onto her. And we'll go into that in the second part. But this is how we know about her, because most of her traditions are in the oral tradition, but we see in these poems and songs and hymns the knowledge that she was very important throughout many centuries. Now, the Christian abbess who set up in Kildare, or Kildare now, Kildare meaning the Church of the Oak, and of course we know the Druids worshipped in Oaken Grove, so that's an immediate tie to the past. And she was the abbess of a monastery where she cut her cloak. It is said she cut her cloak into strips and laid out the parameter of the monastery, and the strips grew overnight, so she got an inordinate amount of land from the local chieftain, and that's how she built her monastery. We also have that she isn't alone in having a cloak of plenty and protection, where she is invoked for protection by women in childbirth and by people going about their spiritual practice. But Parvati in India, the Hindu goddess, also has a cloak of protection, as do other gods and goddesses who are associated with keeping the hearth, or keeping the home protected. And finally, she is the goddess of Leinster, so of the province, and the soldiers used to invoke her going into battle. She was especially invoked by midwives, because again she's the patron saint and was the goddess of childbirth, but all children, that means animals and humans. And she was a goddess of healing. In fact, she was so healing that as she walked as a goddess, it is said that plants and flowers grew up under her feet immediately. Um, the St. Bridget's Cross is, by some studies, considered to be a sort of a compass. So it's interesting that she should use it, because, of course, the sun and the positioning of the stars would have been absolutely fundamental to the early farmers, and right up until modern day, where people use the almanac to find prime planting time and sowing time and reaping time, and even when to cut your hedges and so on and so forth. And it is most notable, of course, that while St. Bridget is the third patron of Ireland, and she's recently been bequeathed the bank holiday, that she is she's an immediate tie to the matrilinear, the goddess culture of ancient Ireland, and that's why we're so happy to have her as part of our culture still today. I hope I haven't gone too fast for anybody, but that's all I have to say on Bridget for the moment. Thank you all very much for listening.